Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, August 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 30 days, the game against Michigan in 114 days. Fall camp opens for the Buckeyes today at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Earlier this week, we previewed some of the biggest storylines to watch on the offensive side of the ball. Today, we're going to be looking at the defense, and there is a whole lot to talk about on the defense as well. My guest today is Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I know it's just camp, but how excited are you to be back covering the team again this year?
Very excited, Tom. Thank you for having me on. You get to talk with guys and get answers that you're not necessarily expecting. I guess those are the best kind of answers. But if we get to see anything, you see, you get your initial impressions and a baseline of where to start sending your thoughts in terms of, okay, this is who is running with the ones, this is who's running with the twos, and are there any surprises? So I think it's the first opportunity to get the real baseline for what we should expect this season. And it's always interesting when somebody kind of out of the blue, like a Denzel Burke last year, is like, why is he running with the ones? And when you've got stuff like that, that makes things even more interesting. And so I'm interested to see if there are any surprises. And with new defensive coaches, there might be.
Yeah, we'll get to the new defensive coaches in just a little bit, but there are some players coming on this year where, a lot of times the great Ohio State teams, it's the second-year players, the emergence of second-year players. It really makes the difference between the Ohio State teams that, are pretty good Ohio State teams that win Big Tens championships, and then the national championships. There were a lot of second-year players that were big players on the 2014 team, the Super Softs in 1968. I mean, these are legendary Ohio State teams, kind of led by second-year players. And on the defensive front, man, there is some talent in that second-year group. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Mike Hall, Tyleik Williams. It feels like more than one of those guys, and potentially three or even four of them, could go from, guys who were kind of, they played roles as true freshmen, and there was some promise there, to being guys who are major contributors to a, potentially very, very good Ohio State team.
I think there's a pretty good chance that you're looking at the starting defensive line for 2023 with those four. There's still be other guys involved, like Ty Hamilton, who's a third-year guy this year. He might be the starting nose tackle next year, might be the starting nose tackle this year. But those four guys are the future of this defensive line, and I'm interested to see how much of the present they are as well. And I think we both expect JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer to play as many snaps as any other defensive end on the roster this year. And as long as they produce, they will continue to do that. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what Mike Hall does in camp. We all got a glimpse of Tyleik Williams, and we all think that that's who he is when he's playing. He's just always getting the quarterback. He's always in the backfield. That's not who almost anybody is. So I don't think you can expect him to be the exact same player he was last year and in his limited opportunities. But we saw quite a bit to like last year, and there's no reason to think that he can't be a playmaker of sorts. But I'm really interested to see what Mike Hall is. And this is a position nose tackle where they do have Jerron Cage. They do have Ty Hamilton. He could conceivably be the third guy there, or he may be the 1B, or he maybe they put him at the 3 tech because they like him better there. But you also have Teron Vincent and Tyleik Williams there. So there's an interesting mix of veteran depth, but those veterans haven't really ever set themselves up as like the no doubt starters. Now, Teron Vincent has started a lot, but the production, there's been questions, and health has been an issue. So it wouldn't be a shock to see a Mike Hall, Tyleik Williams come on, especially Tyleik Williams. I think everybody just expects him to play a bunch this year. But let's see what Mike Hall does, because Jerron Cage has played better and better the last couple of years. Ty Hamilton, younger brother of Davon Hamilton, we saw how he developed in his time at Ohio State, and I think Ty Hamilton is going in that same direction now, tipping the scales around 300 pounds. And so I'm just we'll see how the interior guys shake out in terms of how much they're playing more than anybody else. How much are we hearing about them in camp? What are we hearing from the offensive line? What are we hearing from the defensive ends? Because those two groups, the ends and the tackles like to chirp back and forth with each other. So I'll be interested to see the reviews from the defensive ends on how those young interior guys are doing.
Yeah, that's going to be one of those really, really interesting stories to watch because you're not necessarily, this is not, a spot where there's no veterans ahead of them. There's no, they're just getting the job by default. This is a spot where if you're going to win a starting job, you're going to have to beat out some pretty good players who've been pretty solid at Ohio State for a good amount of time. So it really potentially means something if you do see some of those guys beat someone out. Another spot where there's some questions about who's going to be starting is linebacker, and it feels like, there's only 2 starting linebacker jobs this year in that base package. And it feels to me like if you give me 3 guesses, I can probably guess those two starters. It feels like Steel Chambers and is it Steel Chambers and Cody Simon, Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg? But you got a bunch of other guys in the mix there as well. You got a couple, you got some very promising true freshmen. You got a transfer in Chip Trainum who's transferring positions and also transferring schools. You've got a bunch of guys there who there's a lot of potential, but as Urban Meyer used to say, potential just means you haven't done it yet. So, we sort of have seen Steel Chambers. You've sort of seen some Cody Simon, although he was banged up. Tommy Eichenberg played reasonably well at the end of last year. To me, Tony, this is one of those spots where the depth chart week 1 is not necessarily going to be the depth chart week 9 or 10.
Yeah, and you got Taraji Mitchell in there as well, who's been around now forever. But yeah, I'm with you. It's Steel Chambers seems like the starting will, because that's what he was last year. But this is a bit of a new defense, and so what does Jim Knowles think? And Cody Simon started, I think, 8 games last year, maybe 9 games. I think started 9 games last year. Tommy Eichenberg started 4. Cody Simon dealt with health issues even while he was starting, had the bum shoulder. I think that slowed him a little bit in spring, if I recall. And so what does he look like healthy in this defense? What does Steel Chambers, an incredible athlete, look like in this defense? The linebackers in Jim Knowles' defense tend to get into the backfield. Now, he can get them in there, but are they going to make the plays when they get there? And I think it depends on, if somebody wants to keep that starting job, you better make the plays that are presented to you. And because Jim Knowles' defense will allow players to make plays. And so if you're whiffing on the quarterback or you're whiffing on the running back in the backfield, they don't have time for you. It's got to be somebody else. And there are options. And I am interested to see what Cody Simon does healthy. But is he a Will? Is he a Mike? And with the 2 inside linebackers, it's pretty interchangeable. So I'm with you, Tom. I wonder how much movement we see, not just who rotates in, but who stays. Does Steel Chambers at some point become a Mike? And I know he's had trouble putting as much weight on as they want, so maybe that's not as much of an option. But I expect if I'm expecting Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers to start the opener, and I won't be shocked if something else happens between then and the postseason. But also, like, you've got guys that can play. If they believe they've got guys that can play, you gotta play a few. Now, I don't know how much of a rotation they're going to want to do, but in today's age, you've got to play guys that can play, or else they're going to leave. And you don't want to get too thin, even though a linebacker they don't play a lot, but you don't want to get too thin there.
Yeah, you go back to the end of last year, and they were real thin at the linebacker spot. By the time you got to the Rose Bowl, moved Cade Stover over there at the end of the season, and they had a bunch of transfers in the middle of the season and a bunch of injuries. So yeah, you've got some intriguing young guys there who are probably not going to start yet. I know everyone's very excited about C.J. Hicks. I don't think he's starting day one, put it that way. But yeah, there's some very intriguing young guys there. There's some very intriguing young guys at corner too. In corner, it feels like the conversation is sort of similar to what we just talked about with the defensive line, where you've got Cam Brown, and Cam Brown, when he's been healthy, has been a very good corner for Ohio State. Can he stay healthy? And the rest of that corner rotation, Legend Cavazos is gone. Legend Cavazos is at North Carolina now. Ryan Watts is at Texas now. So now it's 3 second-year guys, but along with Cam Brown in that corner rotation in that top four. Denzel Burke feels like you kind of know what you got there, and I think the expectation is potentially first team All Big Ten kind of season from him there. And then you got two more guys who they were very, very high on coming out of high school, who played a little bit last year. J.K. Johnson got hurt almost immediately and really didn't get a chance to play much. But Jordan Hancock, you saw a little bit out of him, and they were very high on both of those guys coming into last season. I think they're very high on those guys coming into this season. If you can get a total of, two of those guys plus Cam Brown, or three of those guys, plus Cam Brown, boy, you have seen the explosion of the passing game. If you've got 2, 3, 4 really good corners there, especially young corners who you're going to have back next year, boy, that kind of changes the calculus for what this Ohio State defense could be.
Yeah, I think they're really good with their top four. You look back to last year where they had maybe 6 guys, but it was the other guys, Seven Banks, Demario McCall, Legend Cavazos, as you said. Ryan Watts started early on in the season at corner, and there were questions all along there. And when you're starting a true freshman like Denzel Burke, that shouldn't happen. And now he proved himself to be starting caliber. It wasn't a fluke that he was in there. It was probably a depth chart issue that he was in there, but he played well enough and justified starting. But you look at what they have now, and if Ohio State was starting J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock this year, I would be excited to see what they can do. I wouldn't, like last year, starting Ryan Watts and knowing that the issues that everybody, all of the unproven nature of all of those guys that they were trying to throw out there are concerns. I would be excited to see what Jordan Hancock and Jalen Johnson could do with 50, 60 snaps on defense in a game. The fact that that's your 3 and your 4, I think speaks very well to how the corners are going to do for the Buckeyes this year. And, Cam Brown, everybody just wants to see him stay healthy. This is his contract year, so he's going to be doing everything in his power not to just stay healthy, but to be very good and show the NFL that he is worthy of being drafted. And then you've got J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock just fighting to get on the field and fighting to show that they can play. And this is another question. How much rotating do they do? Is that even something Tim Walton wants to do? Jeff Hafley didn't like it. That was a Kerry Combs thing. So where does Tim Walton land on that? And I think that depends on Hancock and Johnson. Like, he may not be in favor of it, but if they are 3 or 4 of the 10 best corners in the country or in the Big Ten, you just gonna leave them on the bench?
Yeah, with the transfer portal being what it is, I think that changes the conversation around that even a little more than you might have had that then you probably have a slightly different conversation around that than you would have 5 years ago. And with the growth of spread offenses, and they're going to be playing 5 defensive backs. This is sort of a 4-2-5 this year. We'll get to the safeties in a minute, but you're going to need. There's a lot of passing. There's a lot of chasing wide receivers around the field. So if you can rotate those corners and kind of keep guys fresh throughout the game, keep guys fresh throughout the season, and get to the point where if you lose a corner to an injury at some point, it's not the end of the world. You're not playing a 4 linebackers against Alabama just because you don't trust the rest of your defensive backfield, or you don't have a healthy enough defensive backfield. Well, that potentially helps you beat Alabama. So that'll be something to watch. Boy, those safety positions, and the corners were a little bit like the defensive line, where we're talking a lot about second-year players. The safeties, to me, Tony, are a little like, I'm going to do a little throwback to Tuesday's show, the offensive line. The offensive line where you felt like, okay, they've got the starting 5, and then what? Who's kind of the guys behind them? It feels like they're pretty happy with Tanner McAllister at that nickel spot. They're pretty happy with Ronnie Hickman probably at that field safety spot. Josh Proctor at that boundary safety spot. This is another spot where you've in the same way you were talking about Cam Brown and can he stay healthy. Josh Proctor had a serious injury last year. Lathan Ransom had a serious injury last year. Jansen Dunn had a serious injury last year. Court Williams has been banged up on and off kind of throughout his career. There's a lot of talent there, but there's sort of a lot of questions there too, where Ronnie Hickman's playing a different spot. Josh Proctor's coming back from a serious injury. And then you've got all these other guys, Cam Martinez, super explosive athlete, but just has not been, you haven't seen him play a ton yet. And this is his, what, fourth season, third season? He feels like he's been around for quite a while. So, yeah, third season. All right. So, but yeah, he's been around for a while now. What is this going to be the year he potentially breaks out? There's just so many names there, and there's a whole bunch of guys who've left too. So you're kind of had this like line change almost at the safety position over the last year. It's going to be so interesting to see how do those snaps shake out. How do these different positions? How does Ronnie Hickman adjust to a new position? There's a lot of questions there for a spot where it feels like you know who the top three guys are, and you should be fairly comfortable with the top three guys.
It's interesting to me because it almost feels like boom or bust, but I don't think the bust is really a bust. But they could be really, really good at safety. We know Josh Proctor has all of the athletic ability in the world and is a big hitter, has some ball skills, and that might play very well at that strong safety, that boundary safety position that Jim Knowles has him at. Ronnie Hickman, the guys, the coaches, the teammates can't say enough good things about him. He was the defensive representative for the Buckeyes at Big Ten Media Days, which gives you an idea of what the coaches think of him as well. I do have concerns though, because he was never really a free safety for the Buckeyes. It wasn't really anything they had him do. Lathan Ransom, coming back from injury, will be brought along kind of slowly and then will ramp up in camp. Where is he? Is he a strong safety? Is he a free safety? Court Williams has always been dealing with his injuries. Is he too big to play safety? Is he, what kind of things will they have him do? I think Cam Martinez as that nickel, the backup nickel, could become a dime. It'll be interesting to see how they do the dime with, is it him? Is it Jordan Hancock? Is it something like that? Who is that sixth guy that they bring in? But the depth there is pretty interesting. We didn't talk about Sonny Styles, so let's just go ahead and say, let's not expect Sonny Styles to really have an impact on defense this year, in my opinion. He's a guy who has graduated a year early, is going to have to learn this defense and show that he can handle whatever it is that they're asking for him. Because, again, he's 6'4", 215, 220 pounds. That's not normal safety size. So they got to make sure he can also handle that position. So there's definitely some question marks. I think some concerns because you're asking guys to do stuff that you haven't seen them do before. They've all had their injury issues, but also if things fall together, I think this could be a really good group. But I'm not. I think there are enough concerns there to where you have to be. You can't be over the top in how good these guys are going to be, but just know that they might be. But there's still so many questions there for each of those guys.
Yeah, and it feels like we'll get answers to some of them probably in the next month or so, but there's going to be a lot that drag on into the season, and you may not have answers to some of these questions until November, bowl games, even next spring. There's still a lot of questions that'll get sorted out. And boy, there are a lot of questions too about the guy who's going to be running the Ohio State defense. I think the expectations are somewhere around about a 17 out of 10 for Jim Knowles heading into fall camp. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. They will probably give up a first down to some team at some point this season. So already he's going to be failing to meet some of the expectations that you're sort of hearing discussed. But it feels like you've got a new scheme. You've got guys potentially in different places. You've got Jim Knowles working with a caliber of players that he has not had access to before. So, he had one of the best defenses in the country last year at Oklahoma State. Man, Tony, I don't even know what's the question here. Like, how good could a Jim Knowles defense potentially be with the caliber of players that he has access to at Ohio State?
Well, then the question also becomes, does he need to do as much as a defensive coordinator when you have more talent? You don't need to maybe create as much chaos because you have the athletes that can just contain and tackle. And whereas at other stops, you've had to create chaos and hope that you hit. And so now you don't necessarily have to buy as many lottery tickets because you're already rich. So you can just live off the interest of your talented defense or your talented players rather than trying to, we need some scratch offs here. At Oklahoma State, they relied on a lot of scratch offs through their just gambling, basically. And it's not necessarily gambling. It was all done with a purpose and it's all done wisely. But I just don't know that he will need to do as much gambling. But if you have the talent, like if you have these athletes, it would be nice to see what they can do. It's the same with all of these old spread offenses that were doing it with Northwestern skill. And you're like, but what if you did it with Florida skill? And you see, oh, well, they won a couple of national titles. So I think there's some similarity there, but I am concerned, Tom. I imagine Twitter, if Notre Dame goes down first possession, just runs the ball, does whatever, just marches down the field, 6 plays, 7 plays, touchdown. Twitter will not be too pleased with old Jim Knowles then.
Well, I don't know what the problem is because that's a problem that has a very easy solution. You just fire everyone and start over. I don't know what I mean. Are you new to Twitter, sir? I don't understand. What is the theoretical problem there? Yeah, that is going to be a really I don't know what the ceiling is for that Ohio State defense, but after a couple seasons, I mean, really 3 out of 4 seasons with subpar Ohio State defenses, it feels like this is, the potential is there between the players and the scheme and and the coaching staff, and it feels like the potential for a top 10, top 5 Ohio State defenses is nationally is right there. And then the offense should be pretty good, above average. I don't want to go too far out over my skis, but it feels like the offense could be above average. It feels like this could be a pretty darn interesting season in Columbus for the Buckeyes, and Buckeye fans might be worth following fairly closely. And a great place to follow this season very closely is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony and I are there, along with Mark Givler, Alex Gleitman, Ross Fulton. We got a whole team of X's and O's gurus there. Justin and Devin. We've got a whole, and potentially someone else coming on soon. It is really going to be a fun place to follow along with the season. Lots of people you like listening to talk about football, read, writing about football, all that good stuff. It's all at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and make sure you're checking out all of our podcasts as well. You can find, obviously, you have obviously found this one. Congratulations, good job. The Buckeyes tomorrow morning, also Buckeye Weekly that Tony and I do. We're going to have a bunch of new shows rolling out this fall as well, so make sure you subscribe to all of those. Leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows. And then if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and leave us a comment, and also ring that bell so you get notified every time we post a new video so you never miss a thing. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.